Hey, I'm Corey Lee, the Cowtown Foundation. Friends, I need to speak to you today. And I need to show you how President Joe Biden and Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack have laid the groundwork to repeal the Fifth Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 through acts legislated by Congress in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. A little background to the story is the American Rescue Plan Act allowed Section 1005 allowed for the federal government to pay Black farmers debt relief for past discriminatory acts. But Section 1006 also gave the right to relief to those farmers aggrieved by discriminatory acts by the Secretary of Agriculture get actual damages. But the clause to it was it gave Secretary Tom Vilsack the discretion whether or not that those farmers could have a hearing before the administrative law judge and get actual damages. In Wynn versus Vilsack, a federal court in Florida says that those farmers were entitled to those hearings under the Administrative Procedures Act. However, it was a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Fifth Amendment to just wholesale give them damages and give them 20% for any consequential tax relief. So the court, in turn, enjoined Section 1005 from being implemented. And so Congress went back, legislated, and basically rewrote Section 1005 and put it into Section 2206 and 22007 of the Inflation Reduction Act, both giving the Secretary of Agriculture discretion. So that brings me to this point. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how the mechanism of allowing Secretary Tom Vilsack to have discretion whether or not he's going to abide by the Fifth Amendment is effectively the groundwork to repeal the Fifth Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 if it's not struck down by the Middle District of Tennessee. So this is where we are. So the Brown versus the Board of Education 1954 basically was a case, as you know, the old cliche, separate is equal. Well, the Supreme Court found that separate is inherently not equal. And so, and on the same day that the Supreme Court struck down Brown, there was another case that basically said that if the states could not maintain a separate but equal policy, then the federal government could not do the same either. So here we are. So when Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, Section 1006 was not enjoined. It's still good law today. But that gives Tom Vilsack the discretion whether or not Black farmers in particular are allowed to proceed under the Administrative Procedure Act, more commonly called the APA, whether or not they will receive actual damages. That's good law. And when it was passed over into the Inflation Reduction Act, it also gave Vilsack the a discretion whether or not these Black farmers would receive hearings to address past discriminatory acts. Now, so if we are not successful of having the mechanism of allowing Secretary of Agriculture and the federal government at large to have discretion whether Black people can be treated equal and have the same due process as white people, then it will be at odds with the Fifth Amendment. And then it logically flows that if you take a state like Florida where Ron DeSantis is going completely nuts, they will start writing legislations when they control both of the state houses, the House and the Senate for state, to start writing laws and acts at the state level that says that they can exercise discretion for them basically to discriminate against Black, brown, and indigenous people, or somebody's gender preference or interracial relationships. That can be done because what's going to happen is they're going to point to Section 1006 of the American Rescue Plan Act, and then also the Inflation Reduction Act under sections 22006 and 22007, and says, it's lawful because the federal government made it lawful in those two congressional acts. Then you also will have to assume it will logically flow that counties will start writing ordinance, giving them discretion, in essence, to discriminate. And so this is very important to Black America in general, because as Congress has taken pandemic, and those who really are racist that are disguising themselves as Democrats have basically laid the groundwork to send us back to slavery. Because if you don't have any constitutional rights, then any law can be written by the federal government. Any law can be written by a state legislator, or counties can institute ordinances to discriminate and point those two acts that says they have discretion to write this law and who is entitled to be protected, or what those laws and ordinances will affect. And so, at this time, I'm not going to come in hard on the Black Congressional Caucus or the Democratic Party. At this point in time, you guys need to join me, because while you were sleeping, Tom Vilsack got away with this. And a lot of the staffers, and I know each of the staff of each congressman and senator has lawyers on board, but how this went unnoticed. And let me point back to you at the beginning of this video. There was a reason why the white farmers did not attack Section 1006 of the American Rescue Plan Act. This was all coordinated with Tom Vilsack, because they've got a much bigger plan, not just for Black farmers, but Black America in general. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party, you have a choice to make. You should ask President Biden not to run for office again, and for the immediate termination of Tom Vilsack. By all accounts, Merrick Garland seems to be a good man. And if we successfully challenge the mechanism that gives Tom Vilsack the discretion to discriminate at the Department of Agriculture, then Merrick Garland can control whether the DOJ appeals the ruling by the court, because the Supreme Court is leaning toward a conservative. Now, we have been watching some things like the Voting Rights Act, even though they upheld the Alabama case last couple of weeks, that the Supreme Court has basically been trying to get rid of the Voting Rights Act and some other things pertaining to civil rights. And so, such as affirmative action. So I'm calling on the Democratic Party to do the right thing. First, to demand that Joe Biden fires or asks for the resignation of Tom Vilsack immediately. And second, we're asking the Democratic Party to ask Mr. Biden not to run again. You guys, the buck stops with Joe Biden. And if the equal rights and due process of Black people are at stake, the buck has to stop with Joe Biden. He signed the law, he has lawyers on his staff, and he knows good and well what the consequences of that mechanism of discretion, what the future could be. It puts the jeopardy of civil rights. It puts civil rights in jeopardy, and basically usher Black people into slavery. So not only that, we the Democratic Party in America should respectfully ask Merrick Garland that if the Lee versus Vilsack suit in the Middle District of Tennessee, which the case number is 23-CV-340, if it is successfully challenged, that the Department of Justice does not appeal the verdict or the opinion to the Sixth Circuit, because it could set this country up into civil unrest like it has never seen before. And it also could really damage America's reputation abroad, because America has taken the moral authority to go after countries like China for their civil rights policies and the aggressions of Russia towards Ukraine, in which it seems that the Department of Agriculture has adopted the same policy and they're implementing it on Black people today. So I'm calling upon, again, Black Congressional Caucus, Black advocates, Black attorneys to join me in Lee versus Vilsack, case number 23-CV-340, to help fight or remove the mechanism to give the federal government a right or a discretion whether or not it's going to implement the Fifth Amendment, in particular, or more specific, the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause. America, this is a very serious situation. And sitting on the sidelines this time will effectively put Black people in jeopardy of going back to slavery. If you would like to help us in some way, please go to the cowtownfoundation.org or cowtownfoundation.org and financially support our movement so we can hire attorneys to successfully challenge that clause of Section 1006 of the American Rescue Plan Act and the clauses 22006 and 22007 of the Inflation Reduction Act. So our resources are very limited, but this cause is worthy. If you cannot join us in the court, please financially support us. And you can do so on cowtownfoundation.org. The link will be in the description. Thank you very much for your time.